Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this edition of Agape Lifecast, where we are going to be looking at Tropical Storm Laura, who has maximum sustained winds of 40 miles an hour and is just located south of Puerto Rico, and Tropical Storm Marco, which is rapidly strengthening and moving off towards the north-northwest at 12 miles an hour, located just off the western tip of Cuba, between the western tip of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. And so we're going to talk about these two systems and some important track changes, I believe. But before we do that, I want to give a disclaimer that we should always follow the official track forecast from the National Hurricane Center, and any advice and discussions from your local emergency management officials. That's what they get paid to do. I'm just sitting here talking about what I think is going to happen. Now, as we look at Hurricane and we look east towards Laura, we can see that Laura is forecast to track over the big islands of Hispaniola, Haiti, and Cuba. Now, one thing that I think I disagree with here is the keeping of the winds at 45 and 50 miles an hour as it tracks over these islands. These islands are notorious tropical cyclone killers, and they really disrupt the circulation of tropical cyclones, and I don't think that this is going to maintain itself at that intensity as it tracks right over the spine of the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Cuba. I think these islands are really going to disrupt this system. However, what's left of it will get out into the Gulf, and I do see it redeveloping, and I think it will still be a threat to the central Louisiana coast here by sometime Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. However, if the system can track to the south of Hispaniola and Cuba, then I see a good chance of it maintaining this intensity. So that may be what they're looking at. But if it follows this track, it's going to have a very hard time maintaining this intensity. So taking a look at the arrival of tropical storm force winds, we can see that the tropical storm force winds should arrive along the Louisiana coast sometime around Wednesday morning. So shifting our attention to Marco, I believe that this is where I'm going to have a problem with the official forecast. And I think what we're going to see here at the 4 o'clock advisory, and then definitely by the 10 o'clock advisory, is I think we're going to see a shift to the east. I believe that this system is a lot stronger than the original forecasts were calling for. And with a stronger system, because this thing is really rapidly intensifying, it's taking advantage of some of that really warm water in the Northwest Caribbean Sea. I think what's going to happen is this system, as it gets out into the central Gulf, it's really not going to make this sharp bend to the west. It probably will bend back to the northwest, but it's going to be moving at such a speed that it's just not going to be able to make the turn in time. And what you're going to see is you're going to see impact somewhere along the central Louisiana coast, maybe the western Louisiana coast between Lake Charles and Sabine Pass. So I believe you're going to see a shift to the right of this forecast track by the 4 p.m. advisory, and then you'll probably see another shift to the right by the 10 p.m. advisory, and taking this the threat to the upper Texas coast, especially like Brazoria County, taking that threat away and moving it to the right and putting the threat more along the Louisiana coast. That's just my guess right now based on what I'm seeing. The other thing I notice is you're really going to have a wall of shear off the upper Texas coast here in about 2 days. And because this is going to be a more vertical system, as they're forecasting it now to become a hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 85 miles an hour, it's going to be a more vertical system. That big wall of shear at around 30 to 35,000 feet will have a tendency to push this thing more to the north. It's going a hurricane at this intensity is going to be more steered by those upper level winds and not more of the lower level winds. Looking at the infrared satellite imagery, we can see we have Laura. It looks pretty well developed. You know, you would think it's got a lot of bright colors. It's pretty well organized, but When you look at the visible imagery, what you notice here is that you have your low level center that's just to the west of all the convection. And we don't want to see that if we want to see a well organized system. This is what we call a sheared system. It's just not well organized. That's the reason why I think it's going to have a hard time moving over those mountains of Hispaniola and Cuba. I think it's going to have a hard time maintaining itself. Shifting our attention to the west, we see Marco. Now, Marco is taking advantage of those warm waters in the Northwest Caribbean Sea. The convection is waning a little bit. We see these cloud tops, they're warming a little bit, but that's to be expected at this time of the morning. We have what we call in the tropics a diurnal pattern. We get a lot of really deep convection forming overnight in the early morning hours, and then around this time of day they kind of weaken, but then they'll pop up again in these smaller, weaker systems. And the one thing we need to really worry about with these smaller systems is they can really fire up very quickly. And if we look at the visible satellite imagery, we can see we have some pretty good banding features forming, and this is a really well put together system. And we can see that by looking at the Cuban radar. We see that just south of the tip of Cuba here, the western tip of Cuba, we have an eye feature forming, and that's indicative of a strengthening system. So taking a look at the forecast track, we have Laura here. We can see we have a pretty good spread here all the way from Mississippi down to around Matagorda Bay. But I think the bullseye here is on central Louisiana coast. And if we take a look at just even more forecast tracks here, we have pretty much from Palacios over to Mississippi. Again, the bullseye here is on central Louisiana. Now, looking at Marco, we see a lot of these forecast tracks are showing this bend, but we're starting to see some that are trying to keep the storm moving more towards the north-northwest, and I believe that this is probably what's going to happen. I don't believe this sharp bend to the west is a reality, and simply it's because this system is getting stronger faster. It's getting stronger a lot quicker than people had forecasted, and it's going to take advantage of a different level of steering, and it's also moving a little bit faster than what we thought it was going to do, and so it's going to beat the building of the ridge, I believe. But we just kind of need to stay tuned. This is the tropics. This is a very tricky forecast situation where we're trying to forecast two different systems at the same time and how they're going to interact with each other, what they're going to do to the ridge, and it's very tricky. And I kind of want to show you this. This kind of shows you how complicated things are. Now, assume that you haven't watched the first thing on the Weather Channel, you haven't watched the local news, you haven't heard the first official forecast, and you're a meteorologist, and you've got to look at these tracks, taking it from anywhere from Tampa Bay, Florida, all the way down into meandering in the Gulf of Mexico or Tampico, and you've got to put out a forecast. Well, that's the difficulty here. You literally have anywhere from Tampico to Tampa Bay possibility here, but that's what meteorologists get paid to do, is to kind of go through these weeds here and pick out your area and say you're going to get slammed, and 200 miles or 150 miles to the west of you are going to get 10-mile-an-hour winds from the north and maybe a couple of sprinkles. So that's just the difficulty that we're facing with this forecast right now. And so again, just kind of pay attention to the weather, especially if you're on the Texas coast and the Louisiana coast, because that is your main threats. The main threat right now is anywhere probably from Freeport to New Orleans. And again, I believe it's for Marco especially, I believe we're looking at from anywhere from Sabine Pass to the central Louisiana coast. And again, central Louisiana coast for Laura. So that's where I believe this is this double whammy is headed. So until next time, just remember, Jesus Christ is still on the throne. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this edition of Agape Livecast. And whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, I ask that you do me a favor. Please like the video and share it. And if you haven't already done so, please like the Agape Livecast Facebook page. and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, may God richly bless you and keep you.